Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to another edition of the RotoBaller Radio Waiver Wire Series. I'm your host, Anthony Aniano, here with you to bring you an early look at the Week 12 Fantasy Football Waiver Wire. Guys, just a reminder, to be the early waiver wire report, we record this Sunday evening before the Sunday night, and obviously before the Monday night football game, so anything can change a little bit with those two games and injuries or ineffectiveness that may occur. We use Yahoo roster percentages as a starting point. Try to keep roster percentages at or about or below 50% rostered. And we start this week with a reminder, Week 12, Thanksgiving week, no bye weeks in Week 12. Everybody's out there. So we should have a full slate of players available. 3 games on Thanksgiving. Buffalo Bills at the Detroit Lions, New York Giants at the Dallas Cowboys, and then the Thursday night Thanksgiving night game, New England Patriots at the Minnesota Vikings. Injury updates at the quarterback position. Matthew Stafford left the game with a head injury. Justin Fields, a shoulder situation reported after the game. You saw him stop running as much later in the game for the Chicago Bears. It was still effective, but it's an injury to be mindful of. 2 running backs left the game at the time of this recording. Chase Edmonds with an ankle. Joe Mixon with a head injury. Wan'Dale Robinson, who we'll talk about in a little bit, left the Giant game with a knee injury at wide receiver. Kyle Pitts left the game for the Atlanta Falcons with a knee injury as well. I'm sure other injuries occurred. Other injuries will come up. So just be mindful of that and continue checking the injury report as you get ready to start your lineup starting Thursday evening. We'll start at the quarterback position. 2 quarterbacks, only 2, that I want to remind you of that are available in some leagues. The number 1 quarterback to add this week, if he's out there, it's now time to get Deshaun Watson on some rosters. Only 48% rostered in Yahoo. He's essentially available in half the leagues over on yahoo.com. Deeper leagues, he's probably already rostered. Other formats, it might be higher, I understand. But with the Yahoo roster percentages as the talking point, need to mention Deshaun Watson. He's returned to practice. He's eligible to return in Week 13. If you wait till then, it's going to be too late. This is the week, if it's not too late, to put in that waiver bid for him. Get him on your roster. Honestly, even if you're rolling with an elite level quarterback and you only have 1 quarterback on your team, you have dead weight at the end of the roster, he's worth an add, even if you want to do it as a potential block move for a future opponent come the playoffs. 48% rostered, Deshaun Watson leads the quarterback room. Number 2, if you need a quarterback for Week 12, maybe you're worried about Justin Fields, you've been using Matthew Stafford, whatever it may be, Ryan Tannehill of the Tennessee Titans is only 16% rostered. Had a good game again Thursday night, 22 of 27, 333 yards and 2 touchdowns. His last 2 games, he's thrown for 2 touchdowns each game, and in a 6-point per touchdown pass league, he's had at least 23 fantasy points each of the last 2 weeks, including 28 fantasy points this week during Week 11. Faces the Cincinnati Bengals in Week 12. Ryan Tannehill, only 16% rostered. Now let's talk running back position. I didn't expect this player to be my number 1 running back ad of the week, but his effectiveness and the Joe Mixon concussion situation makes Samaje Perine a priority ad. Now it could come back to hurt us a little bit. If Mixon gets cleared and he's able to play Week 12, Samaje Perine goes back to his usual role, where he's only had 1 game all season prior to Week 11 with over 10 or more fantasy points. But you saw with Joe Mixon out how effective Samaje Perine could be. First off, he was catching passes for touchdowns in Week 11 before Mixon even went down. Then he went down and Perine took over. His strength, obviously, his ability to catch the ball out of the backfield. He ran the ball 11 times for 30 yards in Week 11, finished with 4 catches, 52 yards, and 3 touchdowns on 4 targets. 30.2 fantasy points. I couldn't ignore the guy who was the second highest scoring running back of the week behind Tony Pollard. Couldn't ignore it. I made him the number 1. You might disagree with that, but if Joe Mixon is out, Samaje Perine is in lineups for Week 12 on the road against the Tennessee Titans. Running back number 2, and it falls off quick, is Cam Akers of the Los Angeles Rams. Right now, you might be rolling your eyes saying, Anthony, you're out of your mind. And trust me, I don't like it. I don't want to play him. I don't even really want to add him all that much. But I can't ignore the fact that he led the team in carries once again. 14 carries for 61 yards. This Rams offense is a disaster. Matthew Stafford with the head injury. Cooper Kupp is going to be out for a while. Allen Robinson had a nice game. But when you look at the backfield for the Rams, they've had multiple offensive line injuries as well. Cam Akers, 14 carries for 61 yards. Kieran Williams, 7 for 36, and a reception for 8 yards. Darrell Henderson only carried the ball 2 times. Cam Akers has reemerged as the feature back at this moment for the Los Angeles Rams. He is a starting running back right now, a featured running back on an NFL team, and yet he's only 27% rostered. And that's the point here. It's very difficult to keep a number one running back on the waiver wire, and that's what's happening with Cam Akers. At the very least, get him on your roster for future bye weeks or injury depth, just have depth at the running back position on the road against the Kansas City Chiefs in Week 12. So he sits at 27% rostered. Number 3 is Latavius Murray of the Denver Broncos. 17 carries, 49 yards, and a touchdown. Continues to get into the end zone and kind of really be the lead ball carrier for the Denver Broncos over Melvin Gordon. He also had 3 receptions for 14 yards, finished with 15.3 fantasy points. Now, Latavius Murray is completely touchdown dependent. He's not a strong enough runner just to give you huge totals based on yardage alone. However, 3 of his last 4 games, Latavius Murray has finished with 10 or more fantasy points, something to be mindful of. He's only 22% rostered, and he's on the road next week, Week 12, at the Carolina Panthers. And number 4, it's really a Devin Singletary handcuff move, but James Cook of the Buffalo Bills is 17% rostered and coming off his best game of the season with 11 carries for 86 yards, 8.6 fantasy points. Buffalo is on the road, but really staying where they're at because they're at Detroit to face the Detroit Lions, a Lions defense that completely did shut down Saquon Barkley and the New York Giants offense. So the running backs, Samaje Perine, 7% rostered. Cam Akers, 27%. Lat Murray, 22%. James Cook, 17% rostered. Now we move over to the wide receiver position, and my number 1 wide receiver played on Thursday night, and that's Treylon Burks of the Tennessee Titans. Rookie, first-round pick, only 20% rostered on Yahoo. He's got 14 targets in his last 2 games, including Thursday night game, where he had 7 receptions on those 8 targets and 111 yards, 18.1 fantasy points. He's emerging now that he's back from injury as the number 1 option for Ryan Tannehill on the at home next week against the Cincinnati Bengals. Wide receiver number 2, Donovan Peoples-Jones of the Cleveland Browns, 44% rostered. He has now 5 straight games of 11 or more fantasy points, including this week where he had 5 catches, 61 yards, and a touchdown, 17.10 fantasy points. Tampa Bay next week, but it's going to be interesting to see what he could do starting Week 13. He, Amari Cooper, paired up with Deshaun Watson. Wide receiver number 3, I wanted it to be Wan'Dale Robinson. I really did. Big game for Wan'Dale Robinson, the rookie, 28% rostered, 13 targets, 9 for 100, 19 fantasy points. Unfortunately for the Giants and Wan'Dale Robinson, as he hurt his knee late in the game, he goes out. Keep in mind the Giants with the quick turnaround Thursday on Thanksgiving. I wouldn't expect Wan'Dale Robinson to be able to play. Which brings me to my new number 3, staying in that same offense, Darius Slayton, who continues to perform for the New York Giants. 51% rostered. It was his 4th straight game this week with 11 or more fantasy points. He finished it with 5 catches on 86 yards. He ended up being targeted 10 times. A lot of that after Wan'Dale Robinson went out with injury. Finished with 13.6 fantasy points. Giant receivers are dropping like flies. Darius Slayton may very well be the last man standing there for Daniel Jones. So continue to potentially see double-digit targets going Darius Slayton's way. And finally, number 4 at the wide receiver position, Demarcus Robinson of the Baltimore Ravens. Only 4% rostered. But keep in mind, Demarcus Robinson now, in 2 of his last 3 games, has 12 or more fantasy points. In his last 3 games, Demarcus Robinson has 21 targets, averaging 7 targets per game. This week, he has 9 targets, catches all 9 of them for 128 yards, 21.8 fantasy points, and a nice matchup week 12 at the Jacksonville Jaguars. So wide receivers, Treylon Burks, Donovan Peoples-Jones, Darius Slayton, Demarcus Robinson, asterisk next to Wan'Dale Robinson because of the knee injury. And finally, 2 tight ends to mention to you here as we muddle through the tight ends again this season. The by far number 1 tight end ad of the week, I mentioned him last week as well, Juwan Johnson of the New Orleans Saints, only 30% rostered. He's got a touchdown in each of the last 3 weeks, 12 or more fantasy points in 4 of his last 5 weeks, finishes week 11 with 3 receptions on 4 targets, 47 yards, and a touchdown, 13.7 fantasy points. Tough matchup for the Saints, Andy Dalton, Juwan Johnson on the road against the 49ers in week 12, but Juwan Johnson's production is just too good to ignore at this point. And number 2, if you're desperate, Logan Thomas of the Washington Commanders, coming off his best game of the season, 5 catches, 65 yards on 6 targets, 11.5 fantasy points. Tyler Heineke is going to be the quarterback for the Washington Commanders the rest of the way. He's throwing the ball to Logan Thomas, and they have a nice matchup week 12 against the Atlanta Falcons. He's only 6% rostered. To wrap it up, my top 5 ads for week 12. At number 5, he's a number 1 running back on an NFL team, whether we like it or not. Number 5, Cam Akers. At number 4, Samaje Perine could be in line for work if Joe Mixon misses a week because of the concussion. So give me Samaje Perine at number 4. Number 3, if you need a tight end, if you've been streaming tight ends and you're desperate due to injury or ineffectiveness, cannot ignore the production of Juwan Johnson. At number 2, he hasn't played a down yet this season, and he's not going to play in week 12, but we could roll him out in week 13 in a revenge game. Deshaun Watson's available in half of the leagues. And the number 1 ad is the rookie, the wide receiver out of Tennessee, who's finally putting it all together for the Titans. Treylon Burks is the number 1 waiver wire ad of the week. Guys, don't forget, like and subscribe right here to RotoBaller's YouTube channel. Head over to rotoballer.com. Sign up right now for the premium package. Use the promotional code ACES. Save some money at checkout and take advantage of all the great content, including lineup optimizers, team sync tools, and much, much more as we guide you through the rest of the fantasy football season. Give me a follow on Twitter at @ANianoFantasy. Make sure you tune in to RotoBaller Radio on SiriusXM Fantasy Sports Radio. Real Talk Ralph, Scott Angle, myself, and Josh Hayes coming at you each and every day. As always, thanks for watching, everybody, and we'll see you next time right here on RotoBaller Radio.